Hi guys, I'm Wade,
Reed.
and this is Slightly Mediocre, where we set the bar low so your expectations are also low.
So we're here to talk about the Jurassic Park films. We're going to talk about the original trilogy first, and then in the second part, part two, we're going to talk about the Jurassic World films, the two new ones that just came out, and then hopefully when the third one comes out, we can talk more about that in a separate episode.
Hopefully. So today, Creed, what are we doing?
So we're going to start off with the very first three films, and starting us off with original Jurassic Park. Came out in the 90s, and this film is one that holds a very special place in my heart because I watched this when I was a baby, and I was watching it, a couple of years old, and I was really liked the film. I really took to it immediately, and to this day, it's still one of my favorite, if not my favorite film of all time. Just the way that the story was told, and I've read the books too. I'm a big Jurassic Park fan. I read the books. And they took a lot from the books, and it was really well put together how the film was, which is why it's regarded so well in general. And for me, it's the reason why I became a scientist. That's what I do for a living. Is that I've always liked Jurassic Park a lot, and I wanted to be a paleontologist. And I'm not a paleontologist, but I'm a marine scientist, and I do a lot of work with geology. So it really influenced my career path and what I do as what I really take interest in.
That's really interesting you bring that up because, so Jurassic Park, the original Jurassic Park, the one I'm wearing the shirt of, that came out in 1993. Now, that is before both of us were born. I was born in 1995, you were 96. So, it had already been out for a couple of years. The Lost World, the second movie, that came out in 1997. Obviously, our parents were going to take us to that because, we're just like we little ones. And then the third movie came out in 2001, which I don't think I saw in theaters just because it was rated like PG-13 or something like that. And, you know how parents are when they're like, oh, I don't want to take my 5-year-old or 6-year-old to go to a PG-13 movie. But it's interesting that you bring up like how it kind of influenced your career path and your college path and everything like that because as long as I can remember, every little boy and every little girl, they kind of go through this weird little phase where they're like, dinosaurs, they're awesome, right? And a lot of people tend to grow out of that. Me, on the other hand, as well as Creed over here, we didn't really grow out of that. I ended up actually going to the same college he did. I was there beforehand, obviously, but because he's younger than me. But whatever. I ended up going to the same college as him, and I went a marine biology route because I was so influenced by seeing fossils and the deep unknown of everything, and how there's still a possibility of a megalodon and stuff like that out in the ocean. Like we don't know what's down there. Like the ocean's 75% of our planet. Like. How are we going to be the ones who are like, oh yeah, we know everything that's in there? No, we don't. I'm going to tell you that right now. Just in the time I was in college, they discovered like 500 new species of fish that were like close to the surface, let alone who knows what's deep. Oh, yeah. Because, they don't have equipment to get that deep. But it's kind of coming off track a little bit, run down a rabbit trail. But, so the movies, the original Jurassic Park movies, obviously, we didn't see them until we were a little older. Yeah. I know there's some guys who saw them, when they were little ones, but I was never really allowed to watch them because technically they're considered horror movies. And my mom was like, no, I don't watch it. So I had to basically go to the library, rent them without my mom knowing. When I was, a teenager, and that's the first time I saw him.
For me, it was the kind of opposite. Like my parents didn't mind that I watched it. Like it was on TV, and I would watch it when I was little, and like I was never fazed by it. Honestly, I've actually never even considered them like horror films. Like I've never been scared by any of the dinosaurs. I've actually been more interested than scared. And like I said, I took to them immediately. I really liked how they were. Just the concept of like human beings and dinosaurs being in the same place at the same time. interacting, and it's pretty. It follows pretty closely to how it would play out and how scientifically things would go about. I'm no expert in engineering, but there have been instances like in the past few years where splicing has taken place and people have been able to clone or create new animals in the lab, and I dare say that in the next few years or so, we could have a real life dinosaur. Granted, it would be harder to take out, the DNA. It's not quite accurate to get DNA from an amber fossil, but they can definitely get DNA from other means. They've been looking into ways by crushing up bones, looking at the bone marrow. In Siberia, there have been whole fossils of whole specimens of animals
just frozen
in there,
like the woolly mammoths and stuff like that.
Yeah, and they still have hair. And granted, the DNA may be a bit outdated or it might be not usable anymore. But I'm sure they'll find technology one day to actually bring these things back to life, these creatures back to life, and that idea has always fascinated me, and I've always really liked it.
And it is interesting that there's 5 movies out there saying that might not be the greatest idea to do this, but they're still doing it.
Yeah.
Why not, right? And then it's also interesting because it was in, I believe, in 1994 or 1995 that they also cloned the sheep, Dolly.
Yes.
And, of course, after Jurassic Park. And another really cool thing about Jurassic Park is that it was really one of the first movies that, use special effects as in depth as it did in this one. Now, granted, a lot of it was still puppets and stuff like that, but when they're doing that whole thing of they do move in herds, that is all special effects, and that's kind of cool to see too. And yes, it makes it look a little dated if you're looking at the original Jurassic Park, but it's still cool.
I think honestly, the first film can hold its own in special effects wise to any of these newer films. Some of the films that we reviewed, these films still hold their weight after all these years. 20 years later on, they're still A-list films in my opinion. You can tell by how much they've earned in the box office and how much they continue to earn in sales and DVD sales, rentals, etc.
Yeah, and that's another thing that you mentioned is 20, 30 years where it's been 20 years ago, almost 30 years. Where in 2013, the 20-year anniversary of the original Jurassic Park, they released out a 3D version of that movie. And I went to go see that in theaters, and that was amazing. It just made that movie so much better. And I couldn't think it got any better, because it was 100% as it is. But, they took it from 100% and they ramped it up to 500%. That was just so cool to, actually feel like you're there in the park.
Oh, yeah. So moving on to the second film, A Lost World, Jurassic Park, I think this film, it gets a bad rap. Some people didn't like it as much as the first one. That's with any film. The original one will always hold precedence over whatever films come after it, and only on rare occasions will the secondary or tertiary films be held in higher regard because of how much better they are, etc. But in my opinion, The Lost World was a great film. It told a great story. It showed a little bit more development in some of the characters, like it showed out Ian Malcolm. Like the difference between Ian Malcolm in the first film and in the second film was completely
night and day.
And he matured so much more.
And that was the thing is, in the first film, you got paleontologists and all these other guys there, and so Jeff Goldblum, Ian Malcolm, he kind of takes a backseat to everything.
Oh yeah.
Literally too, after he gets his leg all screwed up, he is in the backseat of the Jeep. But the point is he didn't really have a primary character role. And you go to the second movie, and the second movie, there's no paleontologist. A completely different storyline compared to the first one. The first one's all about the awe and wonderment of the park and what went wrong, type of thing.
Yeah.
Plus, it's not many movies that you see Samuel L. Jackson die, and he died in that movie. So very interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing is when you go into the second movie, completely different story. They're there, they're hunting the dinosaurs. It's one of those storyline shifts that actually works.
Oh yeah.
And then like Creed here was saying, night and day difference from where Jeff Goldblum's character was in the first movie to the second movie.
I agree. And with the third film I think got the worst rap of all. And I think that's mainly because of the prolonged use of CGI in the film. Like the first two films use actual models to portray the dinosaurs, especially the big T-Rex. She was made completely out of foam and all that, animatronics, etc. And they had puppeteers using the smaller dinosaurs, etc. But with the third film, they used a lot more CGI, and it necessarily wasn't bad. Some people didn't take to it, but I feel like they could have used a bit more realism with using more of the original effects of how they did it. But in my opinion, the third film was still a great film. Brought back Alan Grant, showed his progression after the events of the first movie, how his career has been taking on. Because, with the advent of these new dinosaurs being there, it kind of almost put him out of a job until they realized that nothing can really replace the original dinosaurs, because what they made in the park were dinosaurs, but they weren't the original, ones that were in the dirt that died, 65 million years prior.
At that point, they're just copies. And,
Yeah.
There's always, like, if you put a piece of paper on a copying machine and then you just copy it over and over and over again, it's always just a little bit off.
Yeah. And like they said in the first one, how they spliced DNA from an African tree frog or African frog, some kind of frog species, because they didn't have the entire DNA strand. It wasn't a complete dinosaur. But we're digressing. We're talking about the third film, and in my opinion, the third film wasn't bad. What are your thoughts, Wade?
I think the third film it was interesting because the whole plot line, like the plot line was definitely different. Basically, you had a family. And they end up going I think they were going parasailing or something like that.
Someone's going parasailing with a family friend, and they end up getting stranded on the island.
Yeah. So they end up the parasail ends up getting unhooked, and then they get trapped. The people in the chute basically they end up getting trapped on the island, and then they hire Alan Grant to basically go back to the island with them, and it was. It was an interesting storyline. I don't think it was the best necessarily out of all three movies, but it was a new take. And that's the great thing about this trilogy is that there's always something different in each movie. There's always a different plot line, everything like that. It's not like just reboots or the same thing over and over again, like the Star Wars trilogy, where Star Wars trilogy number one, you have to or A New Hope. Sorry, not Phantom Menace. A New Hope. You go in, you blow up a ship, and then it's over with, right? In Empire, you go in, you're running away from the Empire. And number 6, you go in, you blow up a ship, and then you're done. And it's pretty much the same way in 1, 2, and 3 as well, because Phantom Menace, you go in, you blow up a ship, you're done. So it's one of those things of that Jurassic Park brings to the table is that it's always a different storyline,
Yeah.
It's always a different plot, and that keeps things fresh. So it's almost like you're watching brand new movies every time.
And also they introduce new species, and third film they had a new dinosaur, the Spinosaurus, which also kind of raised some heat with fans that are fans of the original T-Rex, that it kind of superseded as the big bad antagonist, big bad dinosaur. But I think it did a great job in how they portrayed that dinosaur as the main antagonist. It was a different take on being a traditional T-Rex. Like the first two films were the T-Rexes were the ultimate dinosaur, the ultimate enemy, and then within the first minutes of this film, episode 3, the third one, the T-Rex gets killed. Granted, it's a juvenile T-Rex, but still, it's how the plot moves that we're replacing this dinosaur with a whole new one. And that can be seen also with the title screen where they replace a T-Rex on the logo with a Spinosaurus.
Yeah.
But it was a great film. I had no gripes about it. I always hold those films, all three of them, in high regard. I've always really liked them. So stay tuned for the second part. We're going to be talking about the whole new trilogy that we only have 2 films in it right now.
Yeah.
2 new Jurassic World, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. We'll be diving into what we like, what our opinions were on that film. And we'll give our 2 cents. So
Yeah.
like, comment, subscribe. Let us know down in the comments below what your opinions were on those 3 films.
Yeah, we definitely like to hear some opposing comments here because, as you can see, we're kind of biased because we like the movie so much. But, if you guys have, an altering opinion or something like that, we would love to hear it and see kind of what your take is on it.
Yeah.
But other than that, this has been Slightly Mediocre.
Thanks for tuning in.
Where we set the bar low so your expectations aren't high.
Yep.